What's up, guys?
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Steve, how's it going?
How's my audio sounding? Is it all right?
Yeah, it's fine.
Cool. How's it going?
It's going
Not
good,
too
man.
bad.
So wait, are you both on the West Coast?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you live obviously relatively close to each other.
Yeah, real close. I mean, I'm going to see him in about 10 minutes.
So I'll put it this way. I'll make sure, because Chris is, we're recording this whole thing, so I'll make sure that obviously what you just said is not
Oh, cool.
put out on a recording.
We're sneaky about recording.
Yeah, we're usually like the way that we record audio is by surprise. So typically when we have guests on, they just have no idea that we're even recording. And half the time it's like 30 minutes in, they're like, "Are we gonna start?" And I'm like, "Dude, we started 30 minutes ago, man."
That's funny. Steve, you missed it. We were just talking shit about Drew State.
Oh, is it?
I'm kidding.
I say, is that a hot
kidding.
topic?
No, totally.
Because we could talk about that.
Not that I know you're recording now. Fuck that.
I feel like Drew Estate's like the Clintons. You'll find yourself like in half your family buried if you talk shit about them.
Yeah. Yeah. The Swisher Sweet's got a hand there, so.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. You get those big parent companies. That's what happens. So, hey, when are you coming out to Ohio next? Do you have any? I obviously know like quarantine shutdown puts a damper and everything, but
I don't think this year, man. I don't think
Right.
this year. So I don't know. Sometime next year, hopefully, but I don't have plans right now. And it could, like, it could just happen out of nowhere, but I don't have any plans.
right.
Yeah.
I think you guys are on a no-go list for us.
Oh,
Really?
That's right. No, we can't.
Yeah, I
From
think
California, if you leave California and come back, you got to quarantine for 14 days.
I think there's like a list of approved states,
Oh, really?
but I don't think Ohio is on it.
Yeah. Because coronavirus is heavy in the cornfields right now.
Dude, it's weird. Like for me,
You don't
it's
know,
like,
bro.
nothing's really changed. Like it has, because we quarantined like everybody else did. But like when things open back up, it was, for the most part, it's like it's just not a thing. It's just not a big thing here. I don't know.
I think Steve said it best. I forgot who he said it to, but it's like, we do the same shit, just don't post about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's the smart move, right? Like, just don't make it publicly known and do your fucking thing. Like, it's not
Exactly.
I don't know. It's crazy. The whole thing is. So how is that, like, in terms of what you guys do and what you execute on, has that completely changed everything in California? Because I feel like the mayor and the governor are very, what do I want to say? I don't even want to say progressive in the way that they're just like, it's like a hard stance, shut everything down. That's what it seems like, right? Because the last thing I heard was like, it was quarantine lockdown until August. But I don't know if some stuff had loosened up in that time period, but I remember hearing that because I listen to a lot of comedians who all live in LA and listen to podcasts, and they all said the same thing. They're like, we want to get the hell out of here. Like, we don't want to be here anymore. Shit's crazy.
Yeah.
Everything was open for about 3 weeks, and then they just shut everything down again a couple days ago. So, well, not everything, but in most counties, all the major counties, they shut bars down and everything again.
Dude, that's wild.
I heard they have this like thing where they encourage people to turn in other people who are not supposed to be out of quarantine.
There's a hotline.
They did that, and hey, Jesse, there's something for you right there, bro. I don't know if you can read that.
No.
Let's do it. Sorry. Yeah, they did that, and they posted like a website, and a bunch of like 4chan trolls just started sending dick pics to the hotline. So they had to take it down. Yeah.
Classic.
People. I was in New York.
Dude, people will figure out a way to like expose some of these hard and fast rules that come into place that don't really have like the necessary barriers put into place to stop people from like doing shit like that. It's so funny. Like, people take advantage of that shit. It cracks me up.
Of course.
Dude,
that's the best thing about the internet.
You post a public server with like no criteria to post on it, and you just tell people to like turn in their neighbors, and what do you think is going to happen?
No shit.
On the internet, taking a break from playing video games, sending you all the best dick pics they can find on Google. Or their own. I don't know. Who knows?
So you guys legit have like COVID narcs like running around. Are people actually turning people in? There's got to be some assholes out there that are doing it.
Oh,
I don't know. I wouldn't
for
be
sure.
surprised.
I haven't seen anything or heard anybody. And we're also Northern California, so I think, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's more prevalent, like in Southern California, LA.
Yeah,
county,
yeah.
like that.
Well, especially our county is kind of a red county, so they don't really give a fuck. I think like our county just basically told Newsom to go fuck himself because I'm walking into every store and every place. Nobody's got a mask on. Nobody cares. Also, we have like one of the lowest rates of transmission. So it's like, I mean, that could just be luck, but I don't know.
I mean,
I'm a non-mask.
population.
I'm a non-mask wearer. I'll admit it.
I mean, I do it if I have to. I get it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, you know, going into, I had to get some dental work done, like over the last like 3 weeks, and you know, it's, you know, I'm conscious and cognizant of the fact that it's also in the same place where they do like laser eye correction, and then there's like another floor that is like legit everybody's 90 years old in a wheelchair. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna be respectful and I'm gonna wear my mask because there's livelihoods at stake here, but like I'm not the person that's walking down my sidewalk when I'm walking my dogs with a mask on and like a visor and a shield. Like that's crazy. Like,
Dude, I was just in a coffee shop this morning, and there was a guy sitting. There was people sitting. You know, they space the tables and stuff, so it's not as populated as it normally is. But there's a guy sitting at like the little coffee bar, and he's drinking. He's got a mask on, and he removes it like every 10 seconds to take a sip, and then puts it right back on.
What the fuck?
Dude, I went camping last week up in the mountains, like hella secluded. Hikers were walking by with masks on. Like there's nobody else around. Why do you need a mask when you're hiking?
I mean, other than like, do you remember when people like at the gym were wearing the oxygen suppressant masks? Yeah. That's what it reminds me of. It's like high
now
altitude.
They can wear
training.
it without being ashamed.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. They're like, finally, it's my time.
I'll tell you what, if I see another goddamn picture of a guy with a mask on, with the hole cut out for the cigar, if I see one more of those fucking pictures, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to give up cigars for life.
I was legit going to ask you about that if you've seen anybody. I've not seen, there's no one around Ohio, right? So Ohio is very much, and obviously, Jesse, you've been here before. It's a very much don't give a fuck state. It's a very respectful state in terms of like when Mike DeWine came out and said, hey, we need to do these things, precautionary, all this. But just like everything else, people are like, okay, the research and the evidence and the science don't match the precautionary things that are being put into place. People then just make decisions on their own. That's Ohio. Like, hey, we did what you asked us to do. Now it's overkill. So we're going to rebel, go fuck yourself kind of mentality. And there hasn't been like crazy spikes. There's more testing. My sister-in-law, she works in a hospital and they had to furlough. Like, it's weird because when you would see, she lives in Columbus, and you would see on the news, you would have like a news van and obviously like a producer and a newscaster. They'd be in front of the hospital and they're setting up tents outside and stuff. And they're like, oh, the chaos is coming and blah, blah, blah. And then we'd talk to her and she'd be like, we're at 30% capacity. Like we had to let people go because there's no one in our hospital right now. So it's just that weird tail and that spin that everybody kind of puts on it, but it's not been, I mean, as bad as it could have been, it has not been in Ohio at all.
Dude, you want to hear some conspiracy shit? So they were, my girlfriend sent me an article on IG that someone had posted where these nurses in the hospital they got this whole new batch in for like these COVID tests, and they started administering them to people in the hospital, and every single one of them came back positive that they had COVID. And they're like, this doesn't seem right. So then they took a bunch of empty samples and tested against those with like faux names. So they weren't real people. They weren't really being tested. And all of them they were all contaminated with COVID-19. All the tests.
I know I heard my girl's aunt died a month ago, just of old age. Great aunt actually had a heart attack at 75 or something. Didn't have COVID, but they just got the death certificate 2 days ago, and it says COVID-19.
Oh no.
So
That's so fucked
yes,
up.
I just found out last night, Steve.
That's
That's-
crazy.
Dude,
yeah,
Hey,
that's
could
so
you
I don't
report
know.
these things to me immediately, please? Thank you.
My bad, man. I waited 12 hours. My bad.
And you guys are getting ready to meet up. Oh, how dare you? Gavin Newsom he'd be shaking in his office right now.
We're gonna cough in each other's faces when we see each other.
Just your lovely way of saying hello.
Yeah, it's a California thing. You guys wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I would love to.
We'll acquaint you guys with some stuff.
I would say I'd love to come out and try it.
Hey, man, come on out, man. You got a place to stay.
Nah, you're not allowed though. Sorry.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you said you have certain states of which you guys can't fly out to, right? Because and then that's an automatic 14-day quarantine when you come
For
back.
the record, I'm bloviating right out of my ass. I don't actually know. That's just something I heard somebody say, so I'm repeating it as fact.
Well, I will put it this way. I would not at all be surprised in the least. So when you say it, I go, of course that's believable.
Well,
Yeah.
for sure, when you fly back into California, California is one of 14 states you have to quarantine after you fly back into it. I don't know from what state though. I don't know that. So,
Right.
but yeah, it's just either way, stupid.
So do you guys have to, for what you've done, obviously for the hand-rolled documentary in particular, you're traveling all over the place. Like you spend time in Nicaragua, like you're conducting all these interviews. So as you guys conduct your business, like, and I'm assuming you're staying in touch with all those people, obviously probably pretty consistently. Like what kind of damper does that have on, what you guys do as it interrelates to cigars? Like just the travel piece of it in general. Has that been a huge hindrance for you?
We're not traveling currently for it. I mean, the movie's done. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, I've seen it like 10 times.
Yeah. So as of a year ago when it came out, we're kind of done with that. We did go to Nicaragua in February for a separate project with My Father's Cigars, but
Okay.
we were okay then. Now now if we try to travel, you can't go anywhere. Everything's shut down. There are no flights in and out of Nicaragua except for a freight flight once a week. So I don't know. And the surrounding countries are shut down from what we hear. So if we wanted to do anything right now, we'd be screwed.
I flew in from Honduras like a week before they shut down. They were like the first.
Right.
To really
Oh,
shut
shit.
down, I think.
Oh, you're lucky.
You're very lucky.
Yeah.
As I feel like some of those countries, and I know there's some down there where it's like there's been people stuck in the country for months now. Like they're just not ready to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Lucky.
Yeah, very lucky. I mean, I guess maybe there's worse places to get stuck, but at the same time, could you imagine being stuck somewhere for this amount of time? Like with government regulation absolutely definitively stopping you from going anywhere? Like that's crazy.
Dude, if I'm stuck this long, that's it. Forget about me. I found a new family. I'm moving on.
Start a fruit stand.
Yeah. I'll be a white guy setting up a fruit stand on the side of their road. Give them a taste of their own medicine.
So as far as like the hand-rolled documentary, which I absolutely love, and Steve, I was telling Jesse this earlier, I think just in terms of like documentaries overall, obviously the connection with cigars for us makes it very meaningful, but just how well done it was I think that's incredible to me. Like I was telling Jesse, there seems to be a lot more docudramas out there as of recent, like, Tiger King or whatever the hell that one was, right? All these, whatever. I mean, if you call them documentaries, the Aaron Hernandez one, I was like, come on. But this is it just like, even if you're not into cigars, even if you're not a cigar person, cigar guy, cigar gal, I feel like you can really appreciate the way that this documentary was done. I thought it was honestly one of the most well-done documentaries I've seen, which I
appreciate that.
Insanely critical. So that's definitely like a 2 thumbs up for me. But so I guess my curiosity is like your guys' background. What is the interrelated connection to cigars that made you want to do this?
Steve?
There isn't like anything like particular. We just liked cigars. That was it. We got into the film business wanting to tell our stories and like wanting to do fun projects. And, somewhere along the way, we got stuck doing other stuff that was fun, but not exactly what we wanted to do. And at one point we're like, hey, let's just do a documentary, like we've always wanted to do. We kind of like got started on a couple back in the day, and then we just kind of gave up on them because the timing wasn't right and a bunch of things didn't line up. And so we just decided finally, like, let's just go for it. Let's just, however long it takes, if it's a multi-year endeavor, who cares? And then we kind of asked ourselves, like, what is it that we can sort of endure for a while and not burn out completely, no pun intended. And so we just kind of like, came up with the idea of cigars one day. I think we were smoking a cigar, and we're like, why don't we see if there's anything on cigars available? And turns out we searched all the major platforms and nothing really existed. So we thought, this seems like a good a thing as any. There were a few like cool food documentaries. Like we just watched some, a couple of documentaries on the wine. I think we watched some and a couple of other things. And it was like, dude, that's pretty awesome. Let's do something, in that vein that just kind of shows the craftsmanship. And I think initially, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we talked about doing like possibly like a 30-minute documentary with whatever we can find, and then that just avalanched into what hand rolled is. We didn't know we'd go out and do this whole in-depth history and interview all the major manufacturers and a bunch of the key players, and that just kind of avalanched into that as the project started rolling. So
yeah, you mentioned budget constraints and timing is not right. Like when I think of something like hand rolled, like who was like the sponsors behind you guys traveling and doing that? Was it all out of pocket, or was it like or did you have like cigar brands back the documentary?
We had only cigar brands back the documentary. I mean, dude, we were so fortunate because we started with the idea of like, hey, this is kind of an advert for the industry, right? Like, you guys are advertising through the film. People are going to watch the movie and want to smoke a cigar. Kind of like you watch a movie about working out and then you want to work out, or you watch a food documentary and you want to try that restaurant. So we have them all listed on our website. I don't know them off the top of my head, but Pete Johnson from Tatuaje was our biggest backer, our biggest support. Because of him, we were able to really not advertise, but he was able to put a good word in for us with all these manufacturers. And we were unknown in the industry when we started. So if it wasn't for him helping us out, that's why we listed him as an executive producer. If it wasn't for him, man, like I don't know if we would have gotten the interviews that we got. And for example, George Padron hit up Pete and was like, hey, these guys keep emailing us about doing an interview. Do you know them? And Pete's like, yeah, these are good guys. Here's what they're doing, type of thing. That's how we got George. That's how we ultimately got his dad, Jose Orlando. So, but we funded the movie strictly through the cigar industry. Everybody came in, banded together, and supported us. And on our website and in the credits of the film, we have everybody listed that contributed.
Hell yeah.
Which was a pretty incredible list, right? If you watch the documentary all the way through, like we're talking about some of the biggest names in the cigar industry, hands down.
Absolutely.
You got Perdomo in there, Fuente family, EP Carrillo family. Of course, you have Pete Johnson, who's like a hero of mine, essentially. That to me is incredible because it's like the biggest names and also the most fruitful history around their families, right? One of the things that I love that you guys highlighted was that migration from Cuba and really what that meant for a lot of these families who had factories in Cuba. And then of course, everything with Castro kind of put a huge damper on their ability to continue producing under their own private brands. And then there's this mass exodus. And what does that mean? The mass exodus means now we've got to start operations somewhere else. So a lot of it was like these hard resets. And I think a lot of times people don't realize how strenuous that is on a family and the kind of dedication that you have to this craft to literally leave your country and start operations somewhere else. And you guys do such a wonderful job of highlighting, like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's not like we make cigars, yay. It's like there's some shit that happened to a lot of these people and a lot of these families and a lot of their workers. And you guys bring that to light, and it brings a sense of like, there's a humanitarian aspect to this whole industry. And I don't know that it's ever been highlighted in such a profound way than what you guys did in the documentary.
I appreciate that, man. But I mean, like for us, we wanted to tell the story of the cigar industry, and you can't do that without starting with Cuba. And I think Pete's the one that says in the film that Cuba invented the wheel, right, when it comes to cigars. So that's why the film starts with a quick history lesson. Like, hey, this is why we have New World cigars now. This is why we have Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, you name it, Mexico. It's because of these exiled Cubans. And so telling their story and telling the origin story, if you will, even like halfway through the movie when Carlito talks about how Native Americans used to use tobacco as currency, like stuff like that, that's a story that needs to be told.
Yeah, for sure.
So do you think some of what you guys have done in bringing certain things to light within the documentary, because I guess I'm wondering, and I'm sure you've received feedback, so I'm sure you could tell me whether or not this is the case, but I feel like it's a documentary that cigar lovers like ourselves are going to love, but what was the extended reach to those who are either curious about cigars or had a misunderstanding? Like you were saying earlier, the whole idea of like smoking a cigar is like smoking 100 cigarettes. If that were the case, I'd have been dead fucking 12 years ago.
Yeah.
I'd already be in a grave, right? So I guess debunking and demything some of those things. Did you get a lot of reception from folks who weren't as keen to the cigar industry that perhaps used the documentary to learn something that they otherwise didn't already know? Was there a lot of that?
I don't know about a lot, because I mean, you have to remember, we don't hear a lot back from people. Like, it's not like people are going to reach out to us for the most part and tell us their experience with watching the movie. But while we took a year for us to get distribution in order to get the film out on Amazon and all these other platforms. So in that year, we did shop and limited theater releases across the country. And my favorite compliment that we got is either from wives of dudes that smoke that would say like, okay, I understand your love affair with the cigar industry now, or I understand my husband's love affair with the cigar industry. Or the best one is, hey, I kind of want to try a cigar now after watching the film. So stuff like that is huge, man, because you're educating people on this industry that they thought was something completely different up until now. And it's not like they're people that are my age. They're people well into their 50s, 60s, you know what I mean? Like, not old by any means, but they're stuck in a certain mindset. And so that to me was the biggest compliment that we've ever gotten, is just people literally learning something they didn't know before and then kind of changing their mindset about it. And on top of that, guys that think they know everything about cigars, because you'll meet guys in shops that are just like, I know everything there is to know about cigars, but then they'll watch the film and be like, oh, okay, I didn't know this and this and this. And so that's a huge compliment as well. The fact that people can learn stuff from the film and when they presumably know everything.
Dude, I learned a lot from the film, and
Same.
I felt like I already knew a lot. So yeah, it's why I've watched it like 7 times or however many times I've watched it. It's ridiculous. I don't even know what the number is. Like every time I feel like we go to the cigar lounge, it's like always on, and I always just sit there and just watch it like it's the first time that I've seen it. So to me, awesome. I really appreciate the effort and the amount of work, because I could tell how much went into it. And that's, I think, arguably probably what I loved the most about it was like the intention behind it and just the connection that a lot of these interviews make to the history. And then not only the history, but like even curtailing it. I love the message towards the end of the documentary, specifically around the restraints of the FDA regulatory process. Like that to me is like, did a good job of curtailing this rich history of cigars and then what it could mean potentially if it all went away through crippling regulation. Like bringing that forward, think about how many people aren't in the cigar industry that have no fucking clue that the FDA is doing what they're doing to try to like cripple this industry that's been around literally forever. It's
absolutely,
it's insane to me. And you guys do such a good job of just bringing attention and light to that subject that people otherwise just wouldn't know about.
No, absolutely, man. I mean, that's the whole scope of it, man. And showing the fact that they do philanthropical stuff with their charities and medical clinics and stuff like that these cigar manufacturers have. People need to know about that kind of stuff. Now we're together.
All right, spit in his mouth. Do it. I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
Hold on, we said cough.
Oh, sorry.
I don't want to feed into your Ohio fetishes.
Sorry, I was my mind was elsewhere. I'm sorry.
Spit in that boy's mouth.
Dude, that's literally what it would sound like in Ohio. I mean, you literally sound like in Ohio, and I love it.
20 miles from the city. That's what it sounds like.
That's Jamestown right there.
Oh boy. So in terms of like the like, cause I watched an interview that you guys were doing IPCPR, and there was a point in the interview where you said you were surprised by the turnout. I think in a premiere that you did, it was something like 300 people were expected, but like 800 people showed up, and like that was the collective community that was there for the release. Were you at all expecting such wonderful like just representation around the documentary as a whole, or was it like, hey, we're gonna put this out here and see what the hell happens?
Yeah, I think we were not expecting that at all. We got to the venue, and I remember the seats were like all spread out. There were like 800 seats or something like that, and we were just like, oh god, this is gonna look so empty. Like, you know, there's going to be a smattering of people. Like, this is going to suck. It's the first day of the convention. Like, who wants to go and then spend like the evening before the party, like watching a movie, and everybody's like about to get ready for the dinner. And so we were actually like kind of worried. And then people started trickling in, and more people started trickling in, and then more people started trickling in. And we got to the point where I'm looking around the room, and people are standing in the back, and that blew us away. That's when we kind of knew we had something, and people were actually interested in this thing, you know, because I mean, yeah, it's a target audience that's there at IPCPR, but you know, it's just something like nobody really knew what it was back then. You know, it wasn't like it had been out and people were already talking about it, you know. Like I flew in a little late because we had just made some edits to the film, and I had to export the new version of the film. So like I delayed my flight like 5 or 6 hours that day or something, and flew in later. So that's how fresh it was. I mean, it was just right off the cutting room floor.
Dude, that's wild. Like, do you think like after doing the documentary, like interviewing all of the brands and manufacturers, assuming you were into cigars in at least a small amount beforehand, how much has that changed afterwards? Are you guys more into cigars, or is it are you still kind of a hobby thing?
Actually, we're less into cigars because they're like cigarettes, really. We were definitely into cigars before. We smoked them, collected them. That's why we did the film, because for us it was like, oh, this is a no-brainer. We should do this on cigars. But definitely after the fact, sitting down with people, talking to them about their stories before even getting them on camera, you develop a whole new appreciation, seeing them rolled and all the processes. I mean, you guys know the processes are insane from seed to smoke. So seeing all that, you develop a new appreciation. And yeah, man, I mean, for us, it's like it's a love affair. It's not going away. It's something that we're really passionate about, and we don't want to stop being involved with the industry as much as we are right now, even though we don't have a brand or anything like that. But it's just like being involved from the outside is freaking amazing.
So there are next steps, which you said earlier, but we won't mention what those are. But outside of some additional things that you're doing to the documentary that's already been released, what are there other things, other strategies that you have as it interrelates to the cigar industry? And actually, I'm curious just as far as like what you guys do outside of hand rolled. Like, we obviously know you for hand rolled, right? We know you because of cigars, but obviously you're making a living doing other stuff. So in terms of the other things that you're doing, what is a day in the life of Steve and Jesse? Like, what are you guys working on that isn't related to cigars?
There's so many answers we can give you right now, and you'd never know.
Well, we're about to get on a jet ski, not together.
We do a lot of gay porn. My stage name is Hog Johnson.
Don't look it up.
Steve is Asaconda. And no, I mean, we do commercial work. So our whole livelihood is producing commercials and telling stories for companies and or personal stories, or we do a lot of philanthropic stuff as well.
That would have started.
I know, I almost didn't get it out. But I mean, ideally what we'd love to do is, and we've said this from the beginning, that we'd love to tell the story of the cigar industry in individualized episodes. So doing a DocuSeries would be something that we'd love to ultimately get to. You know, other than that, yeah, we still, every day is just kind of like working on commercial stuff and still promoting hand rolled because that's our baby, and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you still see that with hand rolled, there's still some steam around it? Obviously, it had this grandiose entrance into the marketplace back in 2019, last year, right? When it was released. Does it still have momentum? Is it still giving and kind of like shining light? I mean, you said sometimes you don't get direct consumer feedback, but I feel like as people make an entrance or they have intrigue about the cigar industry, I'm not sure that I personally would point them any other direction as far as like knowledge and experience. You have all these like online outlets, right? Informational websites. You have places like Half Wheel that are great with news. You have Cigar Aficionado, who's specifically into like the luxury lifestyle and the ratings of cigars. But in terms of like information and really understanding the history, I'm not sure that I would want to point anybody else in another direction. And the hour and a half that you guys produced, I feel like not only gives the rich history, but gives just a ton of information and very digestible. So are you seeing that as part of like, hey, this is over a year later? Are people still like intrigued by it? People who are actually wanting to get in the industry?
Well, I mean, that's why we continue doing like interviews like these and stuff, because we're finding out that, you know, even though we've been promoting it and the cigar industry isn't huge, every day people are finding out about the film. So it definitely isn't rolling out as much as it did right at the beginning. But yeah, people are still, you know, we're checking our Amazon and iTunes accounts consistently, and what, you know, seeing the viewership rates and stuff like that. And it's still definitely every single day, just about, there's, you know, viewers either downloading it or watching it or rewatching it or whatever. Some of the sites have more information, some have less. So, but yeah, one thing that we thought sort of in making the film is a lot of the stuff, a lot of this information, like you can piece through reading like, you know, decades worth of Cigar Aficionado and try to figure it out. But one thing we figured out, you know, while we were editing is like, this is probably the most in-depth hour and a half you'll get, like return on investment. If that's all you have to watch, like, I mean, there's some great interviews out there like that you could read on Cigar Aficionado. We've read them all, just about, you know, during the pre-production time for the film. But if you just got an hour and a half, this is probably the most jam-packed, contextualized. That's one thing we try to do, is we sort of divided everything by decades to contextualize it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really, not to toot our own horns, but it is really like a fountain of knowledge for the industry. And we, you know, like we just told the story as it came. You know, we didn't try to include any of our own biases in there or anything like that. So, but yeah, I mean, to answer your question, yeah, people are still watching it, and we hope more will, as a result of, you know, these conversations and
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I will say one of the things that I really like, I enjoyed the whole thing, but the use of the tobacco plant as it continues to climb over periods of time, like going up the plant into each individual leaf, I thought was so cool. Like that's something that like, I feel like a cigar guy really enjoys and appreciates.
Yeah. Shout out to our buddy, John Horton, who animated that for us.
So I was thinking about this whole time, like for all the people that you were talking to, right? Pete Johnson, all these amazing people in the industry. What was your favorite part?
Favorite part of talking to people?
Yeah, like like through the whole experience, what did you guys attach to the most? Like what was I'm sure there was a numerous amounts of things, but like something that sticks out in your head that says like, this is this particular interview or this particular interaction was absolutely awesome? I want to hear some of the stories behind the scenes.
Well, the theme of the shoot the entire time, every time we sat down with somebody or after we had just finished the interview, we would look at each other and just be like, what the fuck are we doing here? Or how, like, we have no business being in any of these interviews, right? So that was the theme the whole time. But I think the one that sticks out the most for us that we've talked about the most is Jose Orlando Padron, because we shot the interview with his son the night before. He shut off his cell phone, shut off the phones in the factory where we're at, or the distribution center that we were at. And we were with him for about 5 hours, just interview, then hanging out, smoking and drinking afterwards. But his dad couldn't get a hold of him that whole time. So his dad is freaking out because his factory got bombed. The one in Nicaragua got burned down. So he has this history of just getting fucked with. So he's like, well, these 3 white guys that came into the factory today, like, they have my son hostage, right? So the next day he explained to his dad, like, no, this is what they're doing. They're doing a movie about the industry and they're good guys or whatever. And his dad's like, well, I'll give them an interview if they want. So, and then he became sick, as we all know. That was his last on-camera interview before he passed. So for us, that was huge because, I mean, complete happenstance. And it's because of Padron, for the most part, that we have Nicaraguan tobacco. You know what I mean? And with the, it's crazy. So the fact that we sat down and had that interview with him, even though he was frail, he couldn't smoke a cigar. He had to sit in a specific kind of chair, which sucked for us for the interview because we didn't like those chairs that he was sitting in. But, you know, like, that's the kind of story, is just like, dude, you get what you can at the time and that's it. Yeah. And it happened to be his last on-camera interview. So that for us sticks out the most for sure. But every freaking guy we interviewed, we did about 65 interviews, of which 38 or 39 made the final cut. Every single time we looked at each other like, what are the odds? What are we doing here? Like, this is insane. So we were constantly on a high.
Dude, I could imagine. That would be, I mean, like, literally the people you've interacted with are legitimately some of my heroes in the industry that I don't know that I'll ever get a chance to talk to. Like, we've talked to some great people, but like, those guys are, you talk about like pioneers in the industry, like even with, you know, Nick Perdomo and like all the stuff that he's done and the Fuente family. That's insane. Like, it's just like not everybody gets access to those guys to have those conversations. It just doesn't exist. I mean, you can talk to people within their organizations and you can get a lot of information, but it's like hearing it from the people who experienced it, that lived through some of the horrible times and some of the best times. It's like having that access. I'm fucking jealous. It actually kind of makes me mad.
You should be. We're hella cool.
Alex said it, so I had to believe him.
Yeah, he's a fanboy.
So who was your least favorite person?
Steve, what do you think?
You have to say it.
I don't think I have a least favorite. I don't know. Everybody has something to contribute. So I think I don't know. That's a tough one.
We definitely had interviews that were unusable, but not because the people weren't bad. It's just audio went bad or something. Like, things happen, man.
Yeah,
so,
we're mostly like a crew of 3 of us for the most part. So
yeah,
we had gone to some lengths at times to make things work and hodgepodge, you know, setups together. And,
yeah. Out of everybody that we interviewed, everybody was super nice, super hospitable. We never had a bad experience with anybody that we interviewed. So
yeah, we almost had a bad experience with Hochi, but we turned that around.
Miscommunication.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, say what you will about the people that didn't interview with us, but I'll let you guys fill in whatever blanks you want there. But no, I mean, we just didn't have a bad experience. Like, it's
no hard to fault anybody, because it's like we were literally nobodies. I mean, we still are, but you know, especially at the time, not having produced any content for the cigar industry, it's not like, yeah, those are the guys that do this for the industry. It's like, no, these are guys completely from the outside. No foothold. No, we didn't have a blog. We didn't have a fan page. Like we weren't part of like a bunch of secret Facebook groups for cigar smokers. We weren't into any of that. We were just like a couple of guys out in Northern California that liked cigars and knew how to use a camera pretty well and maybe how to tell a story or two. So, again, I don't really know how to answer that because everybody that interviewed with us really took a risk. I mean, not really a risk, but in the sense of risk because they didn't know what we were doing. For all they knew, that we could have been, out to like expose the industry or some shit. I don't know. Who knows?
There had to been an odd bird though, or some guy that like couldn't speak any English, and you're like, oh boy, like how are we gonna deal with this?
I mean, we just translated everybody. That there was, we did have an argument in editing. Steve wanted to put subtitles for Hochi. I think Hochi does have subtitles, right?
I don't remember.
There's a few.
There's a few, but like Hochi and like Hirochi Robaina, we had to argue whether or not they needed subtitles because to us it seemed like you can understand them, but like to a couple of us, to Steve and the other editor, maybe not so much. So stuff.
We understood them because we knew the context and we remember the interviews and stuff. But some of the English was rough, and so
I don't know. You just adapt. I mean,
settling on a few, but no, that's the thing. Like maybe I'm just looking back through rose-colored glasses, but I don't honestly remember like a really bad experience with anybody. Like it was cool. People were just really hospitable, really nice. I mean, I don't know.
That's the cool thing about the documentary, though, is if you don't speak English, we'll subtitle you. So it doesn't make a difference if you speak it or not. Like,
it's beautiful.
And we're filming in Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, and Cuba. I expect you to not speak perfect freaking English.
There was a sketchy set of. So the first trip to Esteli that we did, we didn't like know anybody, so we showed up to like some random farms and asked some farmers to like basically let us take them home. Like, which sounds really bad, but literally we wanted to drive them home in our van so we
get in our van.
Oddly enough, they did. I wouldn't, but they did.
Yeah.
And we shot like some interviews, but those ended up kind of being unusable, and not because of them, but our translator, like, who's our friend, like this great dude. We've been going to Nicaragua since 2014, and so we have a bunch of friends that are surfers. We're not surfers at all. They're all surfers. We just go and hang out on the beach and film them sometimes. So one of them who like speaks really damn good English, but all of a sudden the camera turned on and he's like in a position as a translator and he forgets both English and Spanish. Like he's just standing there like dumbfounded. And like, I mean, we have full on conversations with this guy. He's not in any way new to speaking English, so he gets dumbfounded. And I understand like, I don't know, 60 to 80% of what's being said, but like this whole thing just threw us for a loop. It was like one of our first set of interviews and we ended up not using any of those interviews, not because there wasn't anything to be said, but it clearly like the questions were just, I was trying to ask questions in my broken ass Spanish and trying to understand. And he was just like he was Helen Keller, he was, I don't know. Maybe we should cut that.
Nah, not on this one. Nope.
So yeah, I don't know. That made for an interesting incident.
How's your Spanish, Jesse?
Not good.
It's all right. It's pretty good.
You learn a lot quickly. You learn a lot quickly.
You do, yeah.
He knows how to ask for the shitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the library.
That's true.
Like the two default things people know how to ask for or say in Spanish.
Exactly.
Was there anybody that you didn't get a chance to interact with or interview that you wish you would have? That maybe in a potential like part 2 or part of like a next adventure when it comes to what you're doing?
I mean, obviously we would have loved to get Carlos Fuente. Would have been amazing. But he passed the same year that we started working on this. So there's just no way it would have happened. That's why we just paid homage to him in the film. But Honduras, we'd love to get some interviews and some footage from Honduras.
Yeah, Roas would be real nice.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still plenty of people that we would love to connect with. It's just, at some point we said we could still try to go and get more interviews, or we can put this thing out because we have so much footage already, and it's been 3 years, and so that's we just decided to finally put it out, and like we could have probably fundraised a little bit more and made another trip and like get to some of the people that we really wanted to get to. I mean, I would have loved to gone round 2 with some people, because like some of the early interviews, even like Nestor, like we had 20 minutes with Nestor because he was like one of the first interviews that we did. And one, like we were just freshly getting used to setting up all our gear like really quickly and, hauling it out of vans and like, getting everything ready. And so like we got 20 minutes with him, and I'd love, to follow up that interview with like another 2-hour-long interview, because their family has the Placentias. They have so much history and so much to say and all that stuff. So, I mean, there's plenty of people we'd love to get and plenty of people we'd like to circle back to.
Yeah. Even like Nick Melillo is a great example. We shot an interview with him early on in Nicaragua. And then a year later, we shot a new interview, which is the interview we used because it was like 2 a.m. when we shot the interview.
We weren't drunk or anything.
No. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But the interview just didn't work. And we had a chance to interview him again. So yeah, there's some stuff like that we could have probably redone. But I mean, we're proud of what we got so far, and no regrets, man.
Yeah, I think it's so. I was just thinking, in terms of like, there's so many people have had such a great impact on the industry, from manufacturers, like the guys who actually are rolling the tobacco, growing it, rolling it, have the whole production, and then you have brands, right? Then you've got a subset of folks who get into the industry but don't necessarily interact at a high level with the actual operation. So there's that piece of it too. Or I think like guys like, obviously Nick has been in the industry for a long time and worked at Drew Estate and has done incredible things. But there's guys that you just mentioned, like the Placencia factory, that literally has done everything for well over 100 years, which is incredible to me. So I feel like just like the amount of knowledge and the stories and the history, you guys uncovered a shit ton, but I still feel like there's got to be like a part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, part 6, because there's so much to talk about.
Maybe like a Euro trip one where it's just nothing but European cigars, huh?
Hey man, twist our arms. I mean, what? Yeah, yes is the answer to whatever question that was. But yes, we'd love to do. That's why we think a DocuSeries would be more beneficial as a follow-up rather than another movie. Because the movie's great, but it's super information heavy, and it only allows people to tell so much of their story at a time. So doing individualized episodes would be amazing, just because each person would have 45 minutes to an hour to fully tell their story. And I think that would be the most beneficial for the industry, and for us as storytellers would be the most rewarding. So that's kind of something we're really putting a lot of effort into making right now.
Even in the craft of the documentary, like I just rewatched Hand Rolled. What was it? 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
For the first time, I probably haven't seen it in 3-4 months. And so it wasn't a fresh set of eyes, but it was a lot fresher than I'd been used to. And so we watched it, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going like, oh man, I remember like all these decisions on timing, but I was thinking like there was some moments where I'm like, man, I wish we would have held 20 more seconds there, and just let that sink in, like that point sink in. But it's like a lot of times we just did like a cut to like a fade to black, and then the next thing started. But it's like, so if you watch it 3 or 4 times, you'll find you missed a bunch of stuff, or like, it was so touching, like, and then you just kind of moved on from it because the movie just moved on. But that's just because, we took down an early cut that I had done that was 4.5 hours long. We took it down to an hour and a half, and we just didn't want to miss anything, and so we didn't want it to be longer than an hour and a half. So there's all of these parts where, like, from a cinematic perspective, I would have loved to let hang and let linger and let the person like really let the information really sink in with the person, but we just didn't have the time for it. And so now with the series, if we get a chance to do it, you know, that those kind of decisions won't be as critical that, you know, for timing. You know, we can linger, we can allow, you know, we can hang on some visuals, on some expressions. I mean, there was a moment where like Nick Perdomo, you know, was crying at the loss of his dad, and it's like, you know, I remember cutting that and going like, man, I really want to leave this on screen a little longer. You know, this is like heavy touching stuff, and not to mention, if you know Nick at all, he's like just kind of like a no nonsense. You know, he's always like in a 3-piece suit. You know, when he's at an event, and he's just like, you know, like
Tough dude.
You know, he's not the kind of guy that's gonna, you know, break down and get emotional. But this stuff is the kind of stuff that's emotional for anybody. You know, it's not, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a soft guy, tough guy, whatever. Like, you know, if you had a parent pass, that's something that's heavy. And so I just remember watching it too. I was like, man, I really wish we could have just hung on that for a second, because like that's touching, that's deep. Like you really get that human connection. And so hopefully we'll get to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's obviously great to talk about Hand Rolled, and I can't say enough about the documentary, but I'm curious about you two in general, and as it interrelates to cigars. So I always have this curiosity around like, what do you guys favorite in a cigar? What are you smoking the most of? What do you want to try? Like, I don't know. It's more of obviously a personal thing, but I'm always curious about like, hey, what's Jesse going to smoke later? What's Steve going to smoke later? What do you find yourself smoking most often? Like, what are those brands right now? What cigars are you enjoying? What's some of your all-time favorites?
That's a popular question that we get asked. I mean, obviously for anybody that smokes cigars, hey, what's your favorite cigar? But I can't say that I have personally a favorite cigar. I think I speak for Steve on this as well, because it's all about the what's it called, the experience, and the who are we with, and what just happened. Like some of the best cigars we've had, even though they're cheap and not cheap but inexpensive, I guess, and you know, otherwise you wouldn't enjoy it as much. But we were with, you know, George Perjon, for example. We were smoking not seconds, but like the cigars that didn't make the boxes. So the employees smoke them because they're not going to be sold to the public. But hanging out with him, smoking those cigars and drinking a glass of scotch was an insane experience, and made those cigars freaking amazing. So, I mean, I personally favor Nicaraguan tobacco. So a lot of anything that comes out of my Father Factory, Foundation, Oliva is great as well. Padron. I mean, whatever tastes good, I love to smoke. So, and not to put down Dominican, I had a Dominican cigar today. I had a Fuente not but an hour before we started the call. But I favor Nicaraguan tobacco, I guess would be my answer to that.
Yeah, it really kind of just depends on the mood and the atmosphere. And I don't know. I don't have I go through kicks, you know, like there was a time where we just smoked a shit ton of Don Pepin Blues or whatever. You know, like right now, I guess probably what I'm smoking most of is like some Olivas, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It really kind of depends. Obviously, one staple for us, even before the film, has been Tatuaje. I mean, we have a bunch of Tatuaje cigars that we're always constantly going through. So, but yeah, I mean, I think those little short La Galeras, you know, those little
The shorties, yeah.
Yeah, man, those are like awesome for like a quick smoke or something. You know, if you've only got like 20 minutes, half an hour. Yeah, it so depends on the setting, and what you're doing. Like, I mean, I'll be working on my yard, just smoking whatever, like just pull something out of the humidor that I haven't tried, and you know, smoke it. So I don't know. It's really tough.
We have smoked some absolutely insane shit, just rare cigars and stuff that's super pricey. And I mean, one story is we smoked a cigar, a Bahique, that was in 2007, something hard to find or something. And the guy was telling us, hey, these are worth about $1,000 a cigar. And then I lit up a $10 My Father cigar right afterwards and enjoyed the hell out of the My Father cigar. and didn't care so much about the Vihique. Not to say that it's a shitty cigar, but it's just like the flavors are different. Yeah, I mean, so we've smoked some crazy shit, but I mean, it's funny that the least expensive cigars we've had happen to be during like the best times of our lives, or the people we were with were freaking awesome, and those were the ones that stick in our heads, you know?
Yeah, so like the environment is kind of what is more conducive to the overall tobacco smoking experience as opposed to just the cigar itself. And we've talked about that. We talk about it on this podcast literally all the time, where it's like some of the most fondest memories or what you remember most about that experience was kind of where you were at, what the setting was, and maybe sometimes less about like, here's these profound flavors that come from this cigar, right? Like it ends up being more than just a cigar, and oftentimes becomes more of the connection that you have with the environment around you and the people around you. Do you have, so where you guys live, California is not the most tobacco friendly state, right?
No.
So in terms of like lounges, like are you guys frequenting lounges often? Or are you just smoking at home and chilling with friends?
Well, during COVID especially, it's been hard because a lot of places just aren't open or not open nearly as much. But there's some cool places here that on the regular are open. You know, so we're up near Sacramento, a little town called Roseville. So we have a place out here that we go to called Perfecto, and then in downtown Sacramento, there's a real nice place we go to. It's called Steampunk, and Folsom Cigars nearby. I don't know. There's a lot of great little spots out here. I wouldn't say there's a ton of them, but you know, there's enough to sort of meet the consumer demand for that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, out like, you know, good luck trying to smoke in most places, even on like restaurant patios and stuff. There's a few places that'll let you, but yeah, it's not terribly frequent that you find something like that.
Yeah.
Cigars out here are a couple bucks more expensive than like Ohio, for example, because of taxes and stuff.
Right. Do you feel that there's some people like we get this? I got this yesterday. I was in Columbus, and I was smoking outdoors just right outside of a brewery, and I swear to God, everybody was looking at me like I was the biggest asshole on earth. They're just like, "What in the fuck is this dickweed doing, smoking the cigar around all of us able-lunged people?" And I'm looking at them like, "Are you serious? Do you get that a lot in California?" I feel like there's some judgmental eyes that peer across in California as well.
I haven't personally. Have you?
Not a ton, but if you are in like more public places, sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, we have gotten like the occasional person like standing 30 feet away and like fake coughing.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Come on, get out of here. You know what I mean? The smoke is not even reaching. It's like so dissipated at that point that there's, you know. But that's, I don't know. I'd say it's pretty rare. But then again, we also don't typically smoke in like just public because it's just we just can't do it here.
Yeah.
Right.
So
even vaping's getting banned publicly too, like in public areas. So it's just all around. It's just kind of like the unspoken rule. You just don't smoke around people.
Right.
I mean, but it's fine. We get around. We're smoking daily, and
Right.
again, cigar lounges. We have our like 3 favorite out here that we go to all the time. Smoked in one last night. I was in Folsom Cigar last night, and, you know, so it's not an issue. But it's finding newer lounges that's kind of hard. You're not going to see a whole lot of new ones popping up.
as people aren't gonna put that kind of investment in when the taxes are so high, and
Right.
it's tough.
But yeah, still it's fine. I've been surprisingly the last couple of weeks getting more fist bumps from random strangers when I'm walking around smoking a cigar. Like it's been weird. Yeah, just the last couple of weeks.
I don't do well with fist bumps.
Yeah.
I kind of like that. That seems something that would be ironically different in California as a fucking fist bump for smoking. Like, hey, dude, I appreciate you. That's what that says.
Well, I mean, you get the guys that are like, "Oh, you're cool because you smoke a cigar." Like, I could never do that. My wife would never let me. But yeah.
So I guess where I want to curtail this now, and I know we've been talking for a while, so I'll make sure that I let you guys get back to shooting commercials. First of all, have you shot any commercials that I would know? Like throw one out there. Seriously? There's got to be.
No, because we shoot. I mean, we shot a couple of McDonald's commercials, but they're like regional. You know, like McDonald's has that all the commercials sort of air regionally. They have some that are like corporate, but unless you live in like California, Oregon, or Nevada, you wouldn't have seen those. And so
more West Coast stuff.
I mean, we shot like
Gotcha.
we shot like some stuff within the industry. We shot like a couple of things for Rocky Patel, for example.
Oh yeah.
That you may or may not have seen. If you saw, we did a couple of Tatuajes commercials as well. Just like on Instagram and stuff. But
And if you're on Pornhub, just see again
our other work.
Dick Johnson, you'll find a lot of stuff. But otherwise, no. You
Jesse, it's so weird, Jesse. I knew I recognized you from somewhere.
Oh yeah, I'll show you what you actually recognize when you stop recording.
Chris, make sure to hit the record button once you stop it.
You can record audio of it hitting the ground.
Thump.
Hey, shut up. Anyway, yeah, big.
So wait, so are you guys? So Steve, Jesse, are you guys married? Not to each other, obviously. Although you could be. It's cool.
No, we are not anymore. We were when the movie came out.
Oh.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that painful question. I miss my kids.
Yikes.
No, we're both going through divorce simultaneously. Not
from each other.
Yeah.
Either.
And not because of each other.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on whose spouse you ask. Yeah.
Well,
unrelated.
You want to ask about our parents' relationship too? It's in all of them. What was our childhood like? Jesus.
Well, I'd say if you went to, if you have family in Cedarville, I know what your childhood was like, dude. You don't have to tell me.
Well, they moved there from California. Hold on a second. They're
Dude, that's a weird migration from California to Cedarville, Ohio.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, well, my aunt worked at Cedarville University. That's why they moved out there.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
This is my dead aunt. She's very dead now. Yeah, hella dead. But,
Jesus, we just keep bringing up all kinds of shit.
Yeah, I know. Let's talk about my dad. That's fun.
Oh, you don't want to see him cry.
Yeah, dude, don't pull a Perdomo on us. Come on, man.
No, his dad's not dead. He's just dead to him.
Yeah. My late father. Oh, man.
So, in terms of just the cigar industry as a whole, what do you guys want to explore outside of what you have coming up? Like a progression in your own knowledge, what are you guys actively pursuing in terms of just like, hey, I want to know more about this? You were talking about that you obviously read a lot in publications, I assume mostly in Cigar Aficionado. But in terms of like other publications, just digesting as much as you can for like more fruitful endeavors, like what are you guys doing? Like, is quarantine presented an opportunity for you to explore and learn more about tobacco as a whole?
I would say learning more of people's stories, man. Like we have a great idea of how people came up in the industry and the struggles they went through, but hearing more details about that would be something I'd be really interested in learning. I mean, watching people make cigars and stuff like that, knowing what goes into cigars, we kind of have a good grasp on that after filming in like 60 different factories or so. Okay, 40 to 60 or whatever. Like over 3 years, like we have a good idea of what goes into cigars now, but hearing more of the come up and the struggles and stuff like that, that's something I'd be more interested in.
We're heavily focused on like the human story, and that's sort of where it starts and ends for us, You'll notice Sandro, like they don't ask anybody about their blends and what they put in their cigars, like aside from just general sort of questions about cigar making. But for the most part, that's not stuff we're really concerned about. You can find that out in other ways if you're really interested. So for us, yeah, definitely. And I mean, man, some of these stories are just so insane, like the risks and stuff. Like that's the stuff that really engages us.
Yeah, that was something that I think I enjoyed quite a lot, just in terms of the documentary, almost like a sense of refreshment, because like I've watched interviews with both of you at IPCR, I believe in 2018 and 2019, And a lot of what you get in just like IPCPR coverage is like regurgitated information, right? You have media outlets that are asking heads of organizations, manufacturers, brands, like, what's the new hot thing coming out? What's this? What is it comprised of, right? The really nerdy shit. But there's not a humanistic piece to that. It's just what's fresh, what's new. It just seems kind of, I don't want to, it's not that it's not authentic. It's just, it's not, there's no depth to it. So it was cool that the documentary exposed the depth to the industry that otherwise people just wouldn't get exposed to. Like just I would say common folk who love cigars, just you don't get that through IPCPR interviews that are plastered all over YouTube. It just doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, especially because at IPCPR, you know, they're there for one purpose, like to buy and sell, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the type of you know, like people like we didn't do any interviews at IPCPR, nothing. No. We didn't even want to. It's like people are in like I need to sell mode, you know, and if they're not selling, they're thinking about selling, you know, or buying or whatever, you know, and so those interviews are just never going to come out great, you know. There's so much noise, there's so much stuff. Like for us, you know, our best interviews, we had like opportunities to sit and hang out with people for, you know, days or, you know, a day or at least a few hours beforehand and just shoot the shit and get to know each other and get comfortable, you know, because it's really hard to just walk up and tell somebody to sit in a chair and just start asking them all kinds of questions and expect them to just, you know, be comfortable and open and whatever. Like it's never going to work out great, you know? So yeah, it's really hard to get those personal stories at IPCPR. And if you've been, you kind of know the environment. It's just, you know, fast, sell.
Yeah.
So I've got one last question, and then I promise I'll let you guys get back to doing what you're doing. Jesse, what kind of hairstyle are you going to change your hair into next? What's it going to look like a month from now?
It's going to stay the same for now.
Dude, I swear to God, it's like every time I've seen you just in like Instagram or in a video or whatever, it's like you fucking morph. You're like a goddamn California chameleon. It's the weirdest shit I've ever seen.
Hey man, you got to blend in to fit in, man. So
that's not even a saying that people say.
It is not. No, it's staying the same. Thanks for that. Yeah, my daughters thought it'd be funny if I had pink hair, so I went a little pink. That's
cool though. Yeah,
it's pretty dope.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, let's go back to the daddy issues. Let's go back to that. That's more fun.
So I think you guys mentioned it earlier. I said I had one question, but I actually have one left. In terms of you've conceptualized what you did with hand rolled, and I think you kind of gave me a little bit of a time frame of at the inception to final production. How long was that time period? That seemed like it was a pretty long period.
I think it was 3.5 years total.
I feel like we had our first conversation about it in December of 15 or something.
Yep.
And I think when it came out of IPCPR was July of 18. So I don't know. You do the math, man.
That's a lot of time.
I mean, publicly it came out July of 19.
Yeah.
So, yeah, jeez.
That was a while.
It took a while.
Good minute.
Yeah, that's a good long while.
But I mean, it took us 2.5 years to film it. We did a year of pre-production, and then getting the distributors lined up and getting it ready to be released took almost another year. So yeah, it was a grip. It took some effort.
It's like we said it a few times. You know, if we could do it all over again, we could do it in half the time and twice as good. You learn a lot going through something your first time.
Yeah.
You know, the stuff that we put out for our just corporate work or commercial work, you know, is generally speaking 30 to 90 seconds. This was 90 minutes. So, you know, it's a whole different endeavor, you know, and everything's changing, you know, like not having, when we like finish our commercial work, we just hand it to the client. You do whatever the hell you want with it. Like we're done. Our job ends there. But then, you know, like figuring out how to deliver the product is a whole new like ball game now. You know, you have all these companies that like are here from like the DVD days and they're trying to get you to distribute to them and sign over rights and stuff. And it's like, we've never done it before. So we're asking a million questions and taking a bunch of meetings and trying to figure it out. And now we get it. You know, we get how to load these things and how to do them, and you know, all the crazy requirements that you have to go through. But it's something that took a long, you know, every step of the way was like a learning process, you know, every single step of the way. So plus it wasn't like when we say, you know, 3.5 years or whatever it wasn't like we were working on it every single day, you know, like there went months and we wouldn't touch, you know, the project because, you know, we didn't have a trip lined up or any funding or whatever, you know, we were just working on our other shit. So,
yeah, we could only go to these countries during the harvest to get anything worth filming. So that's end of December to beginning of April-ish, or beginning of May, depending on the country. So when the harvest is done, we're kind of done till the next harvest, you know. So that took time as well. If everything was open year round, we could have finished filming in a year. Pretty.
Well, and if we had funding and
yeah,
you know, like part of it was too, like, you know, we got our first interviews sort of on a whim in January of 2017. I think we first fired up the camera and hit record on our first interview. And we got a few interviews that year, but it's like people still weren't responding to our emails, you know?
Yeah.
We got a shit ton of interviews in January of 2018, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, it's not as if we had everybody lined up and dialed in and everybody was ready to go and ready to sit down for interviews, you know, because people still weren't responding to our calls and our whatever. I mean, I think once we filmed with Shanken, everything sort of changed, you know, like everybody started paying attention, and that was like an awesome moment for us.
Yeah. That's like you got the big guy, and then it just like has that trickle down effect where it starts opening up pathways and doors to access to other people, which is really cool. Well, I'll tell you this, guys, I can't say it enough. Well, one, I appreciate you both being on with us.
Yeah.
Very fucking cool. Thank you for taking your time out. But just two, I know I have a sincere appreciation for what you've done. And I know there's a ton of people that I know personally, and then other people throughout the industry that appreciate what you guys put together and broadcasting out something that was actually meaningful in the cigar world. There's a lot of things that are they're just whatever. But the informational piece, the humanitarian piece of it, the connection to the families, the history is absolutely fucking incredible. It's the best thing I've seen done ever for cigars. So I'm glad it was you guys. I'm glad you put it out there. And I will tell you this, I'm really excited for whatever you do next as it relates to the cigar industry is going to be badass. And I know I'm itching and waiting for it. And I'm sure a ton of other people are as well.
Yeah. Thank you, man. That's a huge
get you that cream, baby. We'll get you that cream.
That's pretty good.
And you guys have a fucking sense of humor. Thank God. Jesus.
Yeah. Next time we'll be more serious. Next interview.
Please
No.
Please don't. Please don't. Because obviously you can tell we're not the most serious people on earth. So we can create a connection with people who aren't fuddy-duddies.
That's good. I like guys that say fuddy-duddies.
Jesus.
You like guys in general.
Well, that's neither here nor there.
Here, listen.
Exhausted our time here today.
If you're gonna make us circle back to your daddy issues, we're gonna need another hour. All right.
No,
So let's hold that. Let's reserve that for two. I appreciate it, guys.
This is awesome, man. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate it greatly. You guys are wonderful to talk to, and take care. Have an awesome 4th of July weekend, and hopefully we'll talk to you in the near future.
Sounds good, guys. Sounds
All
good.
right. See you guys.
Later.
Okay.
That was fun.
It was. I'm just always dumbfounded by the stories. Like I just literally don't want to speak. I want to be that like fly on the wall every single time.
Yeah, it's weird because like these two guys did something so different in the industry. Like we're used to hearing manufacturer stories, right? Like background, family history, progression, what they're doing from an operational perspective. Not that it's necessarily rinse and repeat because they're all unique in their own way. But what I thought was really cool about these guys is that they have a perspective of two people who love cigars, but aren't necessarily ingrained in the industry the same way as other interviews that we've done, which are typically with folks that have either been a part of this from a family tradition perspective or got it into it as, I want to build my own brand. So some of those stories are very similar, but it's like these are two guys who are very much, I don't want to say on the outside, but are coming in with it from a different perspective. So they're probably, I would say in a lot of instances through that interview process, ask similar questions that would do at manufacturers. But of course, I think their ability to capture it and in a way that resonates not only with cigar smokers, but folks who may not be as close into the cigar world as folks such as ourselves and a lot of our listeners, that's what's pretty cool. Like, I like the idea of having this platform of information to expose to the rest of the world as far as like, this is what exists in cigars. And even if you aren't a part of the industry, if you are, you appreciate it for what it is, because it's an incredible documentary. If you're not, you appreciate it because there's a whole lot to learn.
Plus there's no agenda around the reasoning behind what they did outside of just appreciating cigars. Like, it's one of these things where, you can watch some documentaries that like spin it in a way. It's like, McDonald's is terrible for you. Like, look how they make shit. Like, do you want to put that in your body? But I've never met someone who finally dives into how it's made with cigars and the history behind it. And it goes, yeah, I don't want to be part of that. Like, I feel like everybody that's introduced to it, that gets past the social norm and the taboo nature of what cigars have been for the last 20 years, it like goes away as soon as you familiarize yourself with it.
Yeah, that's actually a really good take, because I feel the same way as far as like, there's not a lot of people I talk to, even if they're not interested, but start to kind of get exposed to what cigars are and what smoking is all about. Like Jesse and Steve both talked about it in our discussion, as far as like, the favorite cigar is sometimes just the one that you're smoking that derives a certain experience. We talk about that all the time, right? It's not necessarily this one cigar is just palatable all the time, and it, ranks towards the top of everything that I want to smoke continually. But it's like, what derived experience did I get? Who was I with? What were my surroundings? What was the environment? And I think that's the attachment people really get to cigar smoking, and sometimes just less the cigar and more about the experience overall, which is really cool. I mean, they hit on, I think that's part of what that rich history gives you. Part of what they did really well in the documentary was actually bringing to light the subtle things that people kind of understand, but not to the depth of which they presented it. So it gives you a whole bunch of more additional information as far as like even just the migration from Cuba and all these families, hard reset button, got to go to Nicaragua, got to go to the Dominican, right? It's what they know. They're not going to do anything else. And a lot of these, organizations had to pack up all their shit, hightail it out of Cuba and start operations elsewhere. And they do such a good job of capturing what that was like, where we just kind of hear some of the stories anecdotally. It's like, these you're hearing from the people's mouth, like, this is what happened to my family. It's crazy.
It's kind of like there's some volatility around it, right? Like, this is an industry that has some volatility. Like other industries, it's like, well, our numbers were down this year because people got sick. But that's maybe a terrible example, but I feel like most small businesses, because I do feel like a lot of cigar brands and manufacturers are considered small business for the most part. No other industry ever, I don't think, has ever gone through something as crazy as this, as the cigar industry.
I mean, not that I know of personally.
Yeah. Maybe pharmaceuticals. I don't know.
Yeah, there's certainly places that have, trials and tribulations. And it's almost like it's weird watching the cigar industry and the people who have been involved with it. It's like, just keep getting kicked. Like keep getting kicked, keep getting knocked down. I'm going to knock you down again. I'm going to knock you down again. I'm going to knock you down again. They're like, yeah, there's like a sense of resiliency in the cigar industry as a whole, which I think is really cool. It stands the test of time. You just think about how old cigars are just in general. Like maybe the alcohol industry with like prohibition, but that's still relatively young in comparison to everything tobacco related.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I saw a photo. I don't know if it was real, but a photo of Cleopatra smoking a cigar. Real photo. You know, real photo. I don't know if they had cameras back then, but in the photo that I saw, Cleopatra was smoking a fucking cigar. It just goes to show that tobacco has been around for thousands of years. Do you get what I'm saying?
Like a hieroglyphic on a pyramid wall.
Yeah. It was Cleopatra smoking a cigar.
I bet that was a real thing.
It probably is. I know I'm making up shit, but I feel like it may be real.
I'll tell you this. I'm looking forward to a part 2, a part 3, part 4, as I kind of already said during the interview, because I think there's so much to explore, so much to uncover. And I'm hoping that next endeavor brings more to light in terms of cigars. Because I thought, all things considered, in cigars, I feel like Hand Rolled was such a huge success and embraced by everybody. So I'm hoping that continues on.
What if they do an expedition where they go through old Mayan temples, and the reason that the Mayans aren't in the Mayan area is because they had to move their tobacco farms to other parts of the world, but it was the biggest industry in the world. Think about it.
Listen, if the Mayans can't get the calendar right, they're not getting tobacco right.
But they're really good with calendars.
Oh, let's wrap this shit up. Episode 157 concluded. Glad we got to spend time with Jesse and Steve, obviously before the 4th of July weekend. I don't know that that's exactly how I wanted to roll into the weekend, no pun intended. That was a great opportunity to talk to 2 guys that have experienced a lot in a short amount of time. So I thank them a ton, greatly appreciate their time.
Yeah.
And again, looking forward to what they're going to do in the future. Whatever it is, it's got to be pretty fucking amazing. So
yeah, ditto.
All right. Well, we don't have any alcohol, but
times are rough, you know.
Cheers.
Wait, hold on. But I'm below you, actually.
Oh, mine's different.
Yeah, hold on. But I'm recording, so put your hand down. There we go.
Greatly appreciate everybody listening. As always, we'll be back at you next week with episode 158. I do want to say the week after may not have an episode.
Oh, yeah, you're vacation. You're vacay. Yeah.
Yep. So we may not have an episode, but tough shit.
And if you like our ESPN headsets, just drop a comment in the post saying, bring back some John Madden, you know, bring some Shannon Sharp to the table, because we can do that.
We can definitely do that. Visit our website, www.hotticketweekly.com, and visit our show sponsor, My Cigar Pack, mycigarpack.com. Hot 10 promo code at checkout is $10 off your first pack.
What a good deal, Corey. You know,
it's literally the best deal.
It's the best.
All right, let's conclude it.
Okay.
It's episode 157. We'll be back at you next week with episode 158. See you, everyone.
See ya.